Space and time may have a structure as intricate as the fauna of a rich ecosystem, but on a scale far larger than the horizon of our observations.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all mankind. Your hosts here in London, Matthew Russell and Jamie Franklin.
I'll tell you what, Matt, happy birthday to Martin John Rees.
Yes. I think he's going to be 76.
So and that will be tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Oh,
or today
if
you're listening on Saturday.
Yeah, good, Matt.
Or
good,
yesterday
good.
if you're listening on Sunday.
This is podcasting.
Yeah. Or last year if you're listening next year.
Okay, stop.
Or today if you're listening in 2 years' time. No, let's stop. Okay, Martin John Rees. What's
Baron Rees.
Baron Rees of Ludlow. OM,
Matt,
FRS, FRNG. Yes.
When you hear the word Baron, does it make you think of what it makes me think of?
What, as in like a woman that is childless?
No, Flash Gordon.
No, I always think of Baron Greenback from Danger Mouse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but you're a bit older than me, so I sort of remember Danger Mouse, but it was just on the cusp.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story. I saw Martin Rees last year because I went to go and see Stephen Hawking.
Yes.
And Stephen Hawking got a little bit poorly, so didn't turn up, and Martin Rees stepped into his shoes. But yes, Martin Rees, British cosmologist and astrophysicist, and the president of the Royal Society between 2005 and 2010, and is the master of Trinity College, Cambridge, and is the astronomer royal.
I would say, Matt, that's pretty esteemed.
Yeah, in terms of astronomy, Martin Rees is out there. And he's got lots and lots of really cool quotes.
Well, I think you picked a good one. Bloody well read as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really well read. I liked it. Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
You should do voiceovers. You should do voiceovers, or minimum.
I think I might.
You should do a podcast.
Well,
wait.
Hang on a second.
So,
Matt, what else has been going on? Hit me.
Yesterday we had the summer solstice.
Were you one of the stoners down at Stonehenge, smoking your wacky backy?
Watching the sunrise, trying to get it through some weird portal in the Stonehenge
Matt,
itself.
What do Druids believe?
I don't know what they believe, but definitely Stonehenge lines up to the solstices. So obviously the Druid beliefs have been lost in the mists of time, and kind of, over the years, silly little things have stepped in. But, there's no two ways about it. People really did believe in astrology until quite recently.
But boy, could they move a rock to align it with the sun?
They could, couldn't they? I love going down the A303 and seeing Stonehenge.
Now, did the Druids move those? Did they align the rocks at Stonehenge? Or were they already there and that was their place of worship? I just don't know enough about it, Matt.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, it's absolutely ancient. There's been a site there for a very, very long time.
Well, listeners, if you know the history, please enlighten us.
Yeah.
On Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.
So, of course, what the summer solstice means is that right at this moment, the Earth is tilted. Well, this pole is tilted as much as it possibly could towards the sun. So 23.44 degrees tilted towards the sun. And therefore, we're getting the most amount of sun. It's not necessarily... It is the longest day, the summer solstice, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the sun rose at the earliest part of the day or set at the latest part of the day. That's actually a little bit more complicated.
It is complicated. Yes.
Yeah, the way that the Earth goes round the sun is quite complicated because we're slightly elliptical in our orbit, so that we speed up and slow down.
That's very true.
It's quite interesting. To really nail down the maths is actually pretty difficult, and I really, really wonder how the flat earthers cope with the maths of this particular conundrum.
I don't think they can cope with much, Matt. Don't throw sun math at them as well.
No. So it's obviously it holds a lot of importance all around the world. But there's a few modern ones which I thought were quite funny. Like International Surfing Day, an international yoga day.
Was this all yesterday?
Yeah, all yesterday. And if you were in Canada, you would have celebrated National Aboriginal Day.
Well, Matt, forget that. You know what it also was? International Selfie Day.
Was it yesterday?
Yeah, apparently. That's what I saw when I logged onto Twitter.
I wonder if that's got anything to do with the summer solstice. But it's also the one that you would like is the Fête de la Musique, which is World Music Day.
Now that's something I can get behind.
Yeah, so that's been going on since 1982. 120 countries get involved. And you're supposed to open up your neighbourhoods and public spaces and parks and play some music.
Well, please, can you do that? I know we've missed it by a day, but guys, open up your windows, blast out a bit of Phil Collins or whatever it is you're listening to.
There is one birthday that's actually today, and that is of Yury Petrovich Artyukhin, who is a Russian cosmonaut and engineer who made a single flight into space on Soyuz 14 back in 1974.
Beautiful. Happy birthday, Yury.
Well, he did die in 1998, but happy birthday.
Oh, I know. Just posthumous.
Posthumous? Is that right? Can you have a posthumous birthday?
It might not be right.
So I tell you what's been funny this week, of course.
Go on.
Is Trump.
Oh, the Space Force.
Space Force.
Oh, my God.
There was a third meeting of the Space Council that was supposed to be signing a document that was... Really, all the document was about this, space debris and how to clean it up. Space traffic management. These mega constellations are only going to happen if America sort out their space traffic management. So that's what that was all about. But yeah, he then went on to do some really weird things like talk about Space Force.
Separate but equal. That was what I liked.
It's going to be something so important. General Dunford. Remember John Dunford?
I do.
I don't reckon he's not General Dunford now, is he?
Oh, I hope he is, but I don't think he is.
I would be worried. I would be very worried. But he also, other than the Space Force stuff, he also seemed to have a swipe at ULA, the United Launch Alliance, and that's with Marilyn Hewson, who's the chief executive of Lockheed, and Dennis Muilenburg, who's her counterpart at Boeing, sitting in the audience, and he's kind of having a go at them and sort of saying, their prices are going up even though they've joined forces. We need them to separate out. And it's like, whoa. So that must have been like a bit of a sweaty moment for those two. I shall be talking about all this with David Baker next week, so it'd be really interesting to see what his take on all that was. But it's kind of, maybe they're going to spin United Launch Alliance out of Boeing and Lockheed so that Tory Bruno, who is a bit of a Twitter legend, by the way, he was tweeting all the way through his daughter's wedding and doing like a countdown last week. Yeah, it was really.
I bet she was happy. Dad, get off Twitter. I'm getting married. Can I encourage our wonderful American listeners to just remind everyone they know to vote in November, please? I mean, it's funny to a certain extent, but I'm getting really tired of this.
What's the vote in November?
Well, it's the mid-elections, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
Let's just try and get this massive, giant orange out of office. Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Every time his name gets mentioned, I just start to sweat internally. Matt, moving on to the ESA Council.
Yes. So there's been quite a few things going on this week with the ESA Council. Ariane 6. Yeah, so the council have decided that they're going to press ahead with Ariane 6 and endorse the start from the transition of Ariane 5 to Ariane 6.
Yeah.
So, yes, they basically said, yes, we're going to go ahead and we're going to, all the participating states that are involved with Ariane 6, which isn't Britain, of course, are pushing forward. So it's going to be So it's going to be Europe's next generation launcher, and it's got to be cheaper than Ariane 5. And there's basically two models, one with 2 strap-on boosters and one with 4.
Nice.
And it's these strap-on boosters that are actually quite an important part of the rocket. So the P120C will be, I believe, the largest solid propellant motor ever built.
Oof.
So it is. So that has got an awful lot of power. But it's also going to be used in the new VEGA-C launcher, which is apparently going to be launching next year. So that's another thing that they've been discussing is the VEGA-C. So the VEGA-C increases the Vega from 1.5 tons to 2.2 tons, and there's loads of things in that as well where they've been using lots of modern technology, like the way that they make the fairings, which is called out of autoclave. So they're like these massive carbon fibre shells that are cast in ovens rather than an autoclave.
Matt, do you remember Vega from Street Fighter 2?
Yes, I do, yes.
The Spanish baddie with his long Logan-type knives.
Yeah, I do.
You're aware of this guy?
I am very aware of him.
Every time you mention Vega...
Yeah.
I picture myself 15 years old with my mate Sam playing constantly from the moment we got up till the moment we went to bed playing Street Fighter 2. And he was a particularly tough baddie to get past. Anyway, carry on.
Well, for me, Vega is one of the stars in the summer triangle. And it's
funny, isn't it? How
I navigate the sky.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourite stars because it's got quite a few double stars all around it. It's a very nice one to look at through even binoculars. It's good.
Two meanings, one word.
Lots of meanings, Vega.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So Ariane 6 and VEGA-C very much on the march to seeing a new launch very soon. And we'll have a very exciting report next week on all of this, of course.
It's very, very exciting.
And we should also stay with Europe as well, because lots of things seem to be happening in that ESA Council that was on the 13th of June 2018 in Paris. Mm-hmm. So they've also been talking about the European Exploration Envelope Programme, or E3P, which is about the 3 exploration destinations, Earth, Moon and Mars.
Ooh.
So it's all about, building the infrastructure for all of that. So from now on, they're going to start negotiating agreements covering contributions to the Lunar Gateway.
Ah, yes.
Including transportation infrastructure. Negotiating agreements covering European contributions to an international Mars sample return mission. Examining scenarios and mission concepts for lunar exploration, and with the aim of finalising the agreements in time for their eventual approval at the Ministerial Council in 2019. So that's one to watch, isn't it? That's a lot of stuff going on there.
Matt, whenever you say stuff like Lunar Gateway, that's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night.
Well, it's funny because Robert Zubrin, last week's guest, I believe refers to the Lunar Gateway as a sort of phone toll booth. He doesn't like it at all. He thinks it's a complete...
Really?
Yeah, he's not a fan.
Oh, Zoobs.
Well, I don't know. I think there's arguments either way, isn't there? It's just. Yeah. But anyway, David Parker, who's the Director of Human and Robotic Exploration at ESA, said, "There's no doubt that the next decade is going to be exciting for space exploration." He's not wrong there. ESA and its member states are working hard to keep Europe at the heart of the journey of discovery and fascination that lies ahead.
It's so exciting.
The most exciting mission, I think, at the moment, this week, is one that gets virtually no press at all, which is absolutely ridiculous, is JAXA's, the Japanese Space Agency's, Hayabusa 2.
Yeah, where is this print?
I know, it's really exciting. So it's really closing in now on Ryugu, an asteroid, and it's starting to take some really, really decent pictures. I've put one in the notes, and it looks like a dice.
Ryu is another Street Fighter 2 character, also Matt. So we've come full circle.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I wonder if Hayabusa is a Street Fighter character.
It might just be.
But yeah, it's expected to arrive on the 27th of June. And when I say arrive, I think that means it's going to start like doing some station keeping when it gets to 20 kilometres away. So I think it's around about 40 kilometres away. So it's starting to get some really decent pictures. And it's approaching at 9 centimetres per second, which I think is quite cool, isn't it? The escape velocity from that particular asteroid is 5 centimetres a second. So it's obviously coming in on a kind of what would you call it? A hyperbolic trajectory. I don't know. I'm not really into orbital mechanics, but it's coming in. So it needs to obviously do a bit of slowing down and be captured by the gravity. So that's going to be really cool, isn't it? It was launched in 2014, so it's taken a long time to get there, like 3.5
worth the wait, years. I reckon.
Oh my god, it's absolutely amazing. This is one of the coolest things ever. So it's been flying on its ion engine since the 10th of January, which added 393 meters a second to the velocity. But it's used very little fuel because these ion engines are so efficient. But it's that's been switched off, so it's just drifting towards its target now. The target's only 1 kilometre wide, this asteroid. But when it gets there, it's going to do some amazing things. It's got two landers called Minerva, both called Minerva 2. I think one's called Minerva 2-1 and the other one's called Minerva 2-2.
Minerva 2-2.
Minerva 2-2.
Wow, okay.
You've got a nerve wearing that 2-2. But on board both of those landers are rovers. I think one's got 2 and the other one's got 1. So these three little rovers are going to be roaming around on this asteroid and doing stuff.
That is mad.
Then it's going to fire a 2 kilogram lump of copper at the rock to create a massive crater so that they can take pictures of like fresh material.
Okay.
And then the actual Hayabusa 2 is going to lower itself down and scrape some samples off the surface of the asteroid and fly back to Earth and deliver it back to Earth.
Well, Matt, could that be the first asteroid mining, technically?
No, because they've actually done it before. So Hayabusa 1, despite all the massive problems that it had, did actually do it, but it got very, very little back. But it's just going to be absolutely unbelievable, isn't it?
That's killer.
So that's
all killer, no filler.
So so it'll be doing its scraping manoeuvre near the end of next year, December 2019, and then it will come into our planet's atmosphere in 2020, and then
sick.
Then we go and collect the capsule and have a whole new load of information. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. And give a shout out to Hayabusa 2. What a fantastic...
Big shout out. Keep your eyes on JAXA.
Fantastic mission that is. Staying over in that part of the world, we've got China. That I saw a brilliant blog on the Planetary Society website by... No, I'm bound to pronounce this name wrong.
Give it a shot, son.
So Lu Yuanzhu did a blog called "How China's Lunar Relay Satellite Arrived in Its Final Orbit," and it gives a little story about how it flies out and gets into one of these halo orbits around the Earth-Moon Lagrange point, which you know is my favourite.
Oh.
There was 2 microsatellites that followed the Kuizhou relay satellite. And one of them broke. I mentioned that last week and lost contact. But the other one is being tracked by amateur radio operators, and it's all working. And the Saudi Arabians, I believe, are involved in helping to get images back from those. And one of them sent back this beautiful image of the moon and with the Earth in the background.
Oh, cool that is so, I'm looking at it right now. That is stunning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Earthrise.
And that's from a little microsatellite. You know, it's incredible what these things can do now. So, you know, it's not long now till we can do the Interplanetary Podcast microsatellite and get some really cool pictures like that. Imagine posting that on your Facebook and going,
Imagine that for International Selfie Day.
There's your mates. Oh, yes.
Take that, Twitter.
Are we actually in that picture? We're not quite in that picture, are we? We might be.
I mean,
I can't see England.
We're just in the dark side.
Yeah. But everyone's in it.
Exactly.
Everyone is in that picture. Oh, my gosh.
Everyone you've ever known. Oh, I won't go into it. I'll tell you what, Matt.
Yeah.
What a quote that is, eh? Pale blue dot. Big shout out to
the Carl Sagan.
Homeboy Carl Sagan.
Absolutely. There's also, this week, we've seen that just I think yesterday, we saw the release of removed debris. The very, very interesting satellite that Surrey Satellites helped build.
Yes.
And on Oleg Artemyev's Twitter account, he posted him videoing the removed debris satellite being released from the International Space Station, and it's so cool. It looks exactly like it looks so brilliant. Looks so much better than the those videos about how it's going to work. Because it just looks it just looks hyper real because it is, I suppose.
Because it is simple.
It looks absolutely brilliant. So well done, everyone involved in that. I'm really looking forward to the results of the removed debris. It's the largest satellite ever deployed from the International Space Station.
God damn. Check it out, please.
Also, there's something that's blown up in the universe and they don't know what it is.
Oh.
So this is something I picked up on the Astronomer's Telegram. The Atlas 18 QQN AT2018cow.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, it's something's blown up. They don't know what it is, so they're looking into that.
Watch this space, literally.
Alan Bond, I really, really, really enjoyed this conversation. He was such a lovely man. We had a nice glass of Carver before we started, and
beautiful.
And basically, this literally has turned into a semi-autobiographical account of Alan Bond's life. And there's so many fantastic little snippets in there, particularly ones about like nuclear propulsion and things like that. That are, if you have a listen to this, there's so many really cool bits. I was really exciting editing it yesterday. But if anyone's got any questions, Alan did invite us back again to have a chat. So if you listen to this and any of these little bits like perk your interest, then do write in and
let us know.
Let us know, and we'll follow it up, and we'll have some brilliant questions to give Alan the next time. This is going to be a two-parter. It was a very long interview. He absolutely soldiered on. You'll hear that he's just basically. I'm just forcing him to talk loads, and he's near the end of the first half. He's coughing. He's coughing a little bit because I'm working him so hard. But it's absolutely fascinating, and you can hear me laughing all the way through because I'm enjoying it so much. So do you want to listen to it?
Without further ado, let's hear it.
Good day. I'm joined by Alan Bond and Colin for a chat here at the British Interplanetary Society in Vauxhall. Hello, Alan.
Hello, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Excellent. So yes, really, this is your chance to tell us a little bit about Alan Bond and your adventures in space, I guess.
Goodness.
So you can take us from the beginning. How did you get into?
How did it begin?
Yeah, how did it begin?
I've been interested in space since I can remember. Space has been always a part of my life, and but the place that actual space flight really began, and everybody knows this story, is back in 1953 with Dan Dare and the Eagle. And up until that point in time, I'd really been very much interested in space as an astronomy issue. In 1959, when I first saw this, I should emphasise I was 9. But nonetheless, I did understand a fair bit about the universe as much as we understood it in those days. But all of a sudden, Dan Dare flew into my life, and I realised that I didn't have to stay on the Earth and sort of look at the skies through a telescope. We might actually be able to get out there and do it. Of course, I didn't appreciate just how difficult a task that was going to be. Dan Dare, it was easy. He'd just pop out to the launching ramp with his crew, get in the St. Christopher and off to rescue the Nautilus and things like that. And it all looked very, very good. And I thought, this is what I want to do. But it was a long, long time after that. There was an awful lot to learn, of course. By the time I got into my, teens proper, 13, 14, the local library had got me listed as a serious student and were getting all kinds of books for me in German and French and English on rocket propulsion. And
any favourites from that era of rocket propulsion?
Well, the one that eventually surfaced as the sort of handbook, which absolutely everybody in rocket propulsion uses, of course, was Sutton's rocket propulsion elements. And that was mathematical, very clear, explained the gas dynamics and so on. And my mathematics had been very good from an early age, so I could understand all that. Round about that time was when I went off to grammar school as well, which was a sudden change in the sort of education that I was getting. So all of a sudden calculus came into my life, and a lot of the things that I'd been struggling with to learn on my own, I'd suddenly got somebody telling me, and that makes a world of difference, of course, even today. All through my life, if somebody else has told me something rather than me having to read it, it always sort of works a lot better.
Absolutely.
But, so yeah, at the age of 14, I was obviously taking notice of what was going on around us. The Russians, obviously in 1957, had orbited the first Sputnik, been anticipating people going to the moon for a long, long time. But in 1960, that was when I really became acknowledged as an engineer in my own right, because on my 16th birthday, excuse me, I walked into the local police station in Ripley in Derbyshire and said, I built a rocket, I want permission to launch it. How do I go about it? Now, of course, out in the backwoods of Derbyshire, going and asking the sort of local police how you go about launching a rocket was an interesting experience.
How big was this rocket then?
It was about 4 foot long, weighed about 20 pounds, and it was going to go for a 10-mile altitude.
Wow.
And I'd got all of the oxidizer, that was an ammonium nitrate oxidizer, and that sat in my airing cupboard for many, many years, because what I hadn't realised that I'd embarked on was a major row with the government. And it seems that I've been in that position the rest of my life, so at 16 was a good start.
16 on a 10-mile rocket, that's pretty
So, yeah, unfortunately, obviously it's a very small town, and one of the barbers there, a guy named Ivan Blant, always used to talk to me about my rocket interests. He'd been a long-term friend of my brother, who was much older than me. And Ivan, being a barber, of course, when anybody else of interest came in, he'd say whatever interesting had passed by him. And via him, plus the local police, it reached the Derby Evening Telegraph. And then next thing I found, I'd got reporters sort of standing on my doorstep wanting to talk to me, contacting the grammar school and wanting to talk to them. And so all of a sudden I became the centre of attention through the latter half of 1960. And when the government came back and said you can't launch it, that produced a bit of a furore in the papers, which you can still look up. I've got copies of most of that. But the government eventually sort of said, you're not launching it. You've got to stand down. So, but in the course of all of that, what actually happened is I met a lot of other people interested in the Midlands and in North London. A guy named Rod Griffiths with the North London Rocket Group, and a guy named Ray Cox with the Midland Amateur Rocket Society. And we clubbed together, quite a big group of us, but we remained the 3 individual rocket groups, but we called ourselves SISM, which was the Society for the Illegal Elevation of Scrap Metal, because in those days it was all sort of under the 1875, I think it is, Explosives Act. We were all operating legally, but for quite a long time, for about 3 years, we went away. We all built our rockets. We then met mostly in Derbyshire. Of course, I've got a lot of open space up there, and we'd meet up Friday nights. We'd spend Saturday getting everything ready, and then Sunday morning it would be out up onto the Derbyshire moors, let everything go or not go, as the case may be. And that was all good stuff, and taught me a lot about the difference between doing a rocket on paper and doing a rocket in reality.
Yeah.
But we did manage to get a rocket. The maximum we reached was about 2 miles, and that was on the Dunstable Downs.
Did you ever have any kind of science payload, or was it just purely about the rocket?
No, I mean, we tried to put radio trackers in them to these rockets were very, very high acceleration because although the propellant we'd finally dropped back to, which was zinc powder and sulfur, the combustion rate was very, very, very rapid. So typical burning time would be a half a second, something like that. And in that time, it would go from sort of nothing up to about Mach 1.2, 1.3. And
like a bullet, essentially.
Well, you could hear sort of a double doomph. As first part of it was the engine lighting. The second bit was it going through the sound barrier at something like 100 feet off the ground. Wow. And when you videoed these things, the rocket is there, and the next thing it's just gone, and there's a cloud of smoke, and the rocket is way up above you. And then a few seconds later, you'd hear it starting to come down. You couldn't see the damn thing, but you could hear it organ piping, because these were long, empty chambers, and as the air flowed past it, it excited internal oscillations. So you could hear this thing way up in the air, and you knew it. You were trying to make yourself as thin a target as possible.
Just playing the odds. Really.
Yeah, we never hurt anybody. I mean, we did operate pretty safely. But during that time altogether, we both launched and tested about 54 rocket motors, and about a third of those actually operated as they should have done. But obviously, in the process, we learned an awful lot. For me, I learned an awful lot about how to do the analysis and calculations, structural analysis and that sort of thing, and quite a lot about thermodynamics of combustion. So what ruined it all is that when I got to 19, I had to go to work. I had to leave grammar school, and I'd originally been set up to go to Imperial College to do applied maths. I'd got some ideas about generating non-Newtonian forces. So in general relativity, there are some solutions which suggest that you can create forces which don't have an equal and opposite reaction. And so that's what I was hoping to do. However, of course, the good old hormones kicked in and women entered my life, and ideas of going off to university went downhill for a while. So what I did do was join Rolls-Royce as an engineering apprentice, and I did my degree part-time with Rolls-Royce. And so I finished up then in the rocket department, terminated my apprenticeship early, and I went to work as a performance engineer under a very stimulating guy named Viv Wallace. But over the rocket department overall, of course, was the really stimulating and exciting guy, Val Cleaver. And Val and myself became sort of very good friends very quickly. Earlier, when I was 18, he'd actually organised a trip to Spade Adam for me. And 2 years even before that, during this period in 1960, he'd arranged for Steve Bragg to go through the design of Poltergeist and make a pronouncement over whether I'd done all the sums and everything right. And I've got a letter that I treasure from Steve Bragg saying, it all looks fine, but it's still damn dangerous, don't do it. And so by the time we got to, where would we be? 1965, I guess. Although I was still an apprentice at that point, I was working pretty much full-time in the rocket department. And in those days, we used to have computeresses who were young ladies that drove the mechanical frightened calculators, and we had to have a separate glass box that these worked in because they made so much noise that they disturbed the design office. But we were supporting the design office. But what I found is that I could come up with all sorts of little mathematical tricks that would speed up and help them to do the calculations on the calculators. And because the project that I became absorbed into was the RZ-20 hydrogen-oxygen engine program. That was really exciting because obviously back in the mid to late 60s, hydrogen-oxygen was the forefront propulsion technology, and there I was, deputy essentially to a team actually doing that. And in 1968, we tested the combustion chamber that we'd been building. It was a joint project with the French, so the French got the turbopump side of it, and we got the combustion system. But unfortunately, politics being what it is in this country, that nice Mr. Wedgwood Ben by then had sort of cancelled our involvement with ELDO, as it was at that time. And all of the work on the hydrogen programme stopped. But what that did do, which in retrospect was probably better than continuing with the programme, was the French and the Germans who were going to pick up the engine came to Rolls-Royce and asked Rolls-Royce to be honest broker between two very different designs that they were doing. And it was that first brought me into contact with the extraordinary advanced high-pressure pre-burner cycle technology that the Germans were doing. Now, in those days, of course, we didn't know that it was all old hat to the Russians. They'd been doing it a long time, and there was a lot of stuff on the theory of it. But it brought me into contact with a German engineer, Michael Kaufmann. And what I think, well, I learned a lot from Michael Kaufmann in terms of how to analyse the engines and so on. But the thing that really I carried away from Michael Kaufmann is that do the analysis, don't be frightened of the numbers. If the numbers say it's possible and you've done it, then it's possible. So in those days, you used to be frightened because, you know, the standard combustion chamber pressures were sort of like 700 psi, good old-fashioned units, sort of, what would that be, about 40 bar, I guess, 40 or 50 bar, whereas the Germans were already pushing 100 bar in their combustion systems. And of course, they showed the Americans what they'd done, and Rocketdyne and various other companies picked that up and incorporated it into what became the shuttle main engine, operating at over 200 bar. And this is where this message from Kaufmann came home, really. If the numbers say it's possible, it's possible. Don't be frightened, because nobody's ever been above 300 psi before. You know, all this other pressure is there to be had. Somebody's got to go there, and that was a real good message to pick up from all of that. Anyway, the rocket department sort of lumbered on supplying blue streaks up until 1972. And I was involved. My bread and butter daytime job was checking out engines for blue streak. So all the test work was done at Spade Adam. We had a performance office at Spade Adam that did the preliminary test work. And then it was up to me and my small team that I'd then accumulated to go into some depth in the analysis to make sure that the engines were behaving themselves. But also, even on the blue streak engines, which were pretty ancient by then, they'd been around 10, 15 years historically back in America, there was still a number of things that we didn't understand. And indeed, there are still a few mysteries even today hanging over the performance of blue streak, which every now and then I sort of go back and visit, because I hate sort of little unanswered questions. But, one of the interesting things on blue streak, it suffers something called pogo vibration, which is a coupling between the cavitation pressure at the pump inlet and the acceleration of the vehicle. And of course, a rocket is very, very thin structure, stressed to the limit, and so it's very flexible in the longitudinal direction. And so what happens is you get a slight increase in thrust. That takes time to transmit itself down the structure before it gets fed back as an input on the pressure at the LOX pump. And so the vehicle then goes into steady state oscillations. We didn't see it on the early blue streaks, but once we got to the 7th and 8th flight, then where the upper stages were now fueled and heavy, we then saw it start to come in, and the heavier the vehicle got, the more we saw it, and we would have had to do something about it. We'd already started to do tests to control the pogo vibration, but because of the programme coming to an end, we never finished that.
What sort of year was that, around about?
So we're talking about around about 1970, and obviously one of the problems that Rolls-Royce had is that the company went into bankruptcy in 71 over engineering problems with the RB211 carbon fan, where Rolls-Royce had rather pushed the technology ahead of where the experimental program was. And and had committed to the carbon plastic fan, which proved to have very poor ductility and very poor fracture toughness. So Rolls-Royce got itself into trouble on that score. But there were also, the rocket department by then had been moved from Derby. It had been merged with the Bristol group back in '67. And we were all on the site at Anstey, and Anstey just outside Coventry. Industrial strife in Coventry was legendary in those days. And as a consequence, there was a period when there was a 3-month strike. I wasn't a member of the union. Rolls-Royce withheld my cards. I had no source of pay, so I got pushed into the union at that point in time. We'll come back to that in a moment. And I'd got 3 months essentially at home. So I teamed up with another guy named Bob Anderson. And Val Cleaver, of course, had always been known for his early pioneering work in nuclear rocket propulsion. And so I embarked on the design of a nuclear engine with Bob Anderson, and we spent 3 months sort of sorting that out. And we went round to see Val Cleaver at the hotel he was staying at in Kenilworth and run it by him. And so it was a good paid 3 months project study. And we then published that as a report. And in fact, for a short while, the company was trying to push the possibility of a nuclear space tug to complement the shuttle in the earlier 1970s. So one of these great international things that never came to anything, that the Americans were going to build the shuttle, and they were appealing to Europe to provide the in-space part of the infrastructure, the space tug. And at that time, it was all very exciting. This was going to be a real transportation system. Obviously, the moon landings were still going on at that time. But what people were doing were looking further ahead for when we had a real transportation system, not the one-off sort of Roman candle missions that were then currently taking place. And so I got involved in a lot of reusable launch vehicle studies. And thanks to Val Cleaver, he pushed a lot of those to his mates in America. So had a lot of feedback on some of that stuff from the Lewis Research Centre. There was also a guy named Bob Salkeld came to the fore at that time. He was an American. What Bob had identified is that because liquid hydrogen is such a low density, then you can actually maximize the payload of a vehicle going into orbit if you burn kerosene and oxygen first and then hydrogen and oxygen second. And you then optimize that for the structural fraction. And so although the weight of the vehicle increases at liftoff because of the density of kerosene, the actual weight of the bit that finally goes into orbit can be maximized. And so we looked at that, and after some meetings with Val, we thought, well, could we get a single engine to burn both hydrogen and kerosene with oxygen? And so we did some preliminary studies on that. Val talked to Rudy Beichel at Aerojet about that. Rudy Beichel, of course, had got a massive teams at his disposal, whereas Val had only got me. And so Rudy Beichel was very quickly into print with a bipropellant engine, a bi-fuel engine, based on some of the principles we thought about, but Aerojet took that a step further. And then to cap it all, the Russians built the 700 series engines first. So of everybody, it was the Russians that actually went away and built the first sort of bi-fuel engines. So that was also sort of quite interesting, but it was the nuclear stuff that I found pretty exciting, because if we were going to go out and conquer the universe, starting with the solar system, we had to have some way of doing it. And I came up with what ultimately I didn't realise at the time would form the engines for Hotol and Sklon. But this was a nuclear engine at the time. So you've got a vehicle and it's got a nuclear reactor on it, which is hot, and you've got liquid hydrogen on it, which is cold. And the engines that Val Cleaver and Les Shepard had pioneered back at the back end of the 40s, 1948, obviously the seminal papers in the Journal of British Interplanetary Society on that. That was just taking the cold stuff, pushing it through the hot thing, and it all came out hot, produced thrust. But thermodynamics has been something that has always been, way back into the mists of time, a strong fascination to me. And the second law of thermodynamics actually says you can do something better than that. Because if you've got somewhere that's hot and somewhere that's cold, in the process of rejecting hot to the cold, you can actually convert some of that into meaningful work in between. And so what I devised was the first of the cycles, which heated the hydrogen with the waste heat from the energy conversion system. So you still finished up with hot hydrogen, but now you'd also got a lot of electrical energy that you could use to heat it further. And you can do a rather simple-minded calculation just based on conservation of entropy and energy in the process. And it turns out that you can heat the hydrogen to probably double the reactor temperature if you wanted to. Now, when you put some efficiency in it, as with a lot of stuff in the second law of thermodynamics, it very quickly clobbers your first ambitions. But nonetheless, it still leaves the possibility of having a nuclear thermal engine. I mean, Nerva and the rover reactors, they all produced exhaust velocities of sort of 9 kilometers to 10 kilometers a second, whereas you can get exhaust velocities up to 12 kilometers a second or even higher. Now, that might not sound like very much, but because of the logarithmic nature of the rocket equation, that makes a huge difference. So it turns out that I'd stumbled onto a route whereby we could actually improve nuclear propulsion quite a lot with very high thrust nuclear engines. But of course, there's a stigma of launching nuclear rockets from the Earth, even though in some of I still continue to tinker with designs of this sort. The hydrogen doesn't pass through the core in any of the designs I look at, so the exhaust is not radioactive. But of course, there's a lot of neutron radiation gets out of the engine, but the atmosphere absorbs all that quite rapidly. The real problem is if you get a failure during launch, and then you make a bit of a mess. Now, it depends on what you think is scary, but the sort of fallout that you'd get would be equivalent to a sort of 8 kiloton bomb, smaller than the bombs that were dropped on Japan during the Second World War. And provided that was from a known launch site, then I do believe that you could have downrange safety, etc. But nonetheless, there's a huge stigma associated with trying to operate a nuclear rocket from the ground. Whether that will ever go away, I don't know. But
is that something that manufacturing, say, that kind of vehicle in space or on the moon, for example, would that take away that?
It would. So I think that people today do still look wistfully at the idea of having nuclear rockets operating in space. But before you can do that, and to do exactly as you've just said, we need a credible operational space transport infrastructure. And so back to chemistry, essentially. Obviously, the rocket business in the UK dried up in 1972. The last Blue Streak flew at that date. Unfortunately, it was also a failure, F-11. We'd had a whole series of failures. I mean, we always say that Blue Streak never failed, and the reality is that it didn't. But we had failures from German stages, French stages, the Italian shroud, and then finally the Dutch telemetry system corrupted the guidance system and caused Blue Streak to do a yaw, which broke the vehicle in half. And unfortunately, Blue Streak was then getting a bit small. Larger vehicles were needed. The Europeans, particularly the French, had been pushing for a long time for a much bigger vehicle. I know that there is such as there is left of the Blue Streak community these days. You've got to bear in mind now, I was a young chap in that, and I'm 74 now. So the Blue Streak community always felt we was robbed. But the reality is, if you look at it, I mean, the Eldo 2 vehicle could put about 360 kilograms into a geostationary orbit. I mean, we look at 10 20 times that today. And thanks to the French and the Germans, they developed the Ariane series of rockets 1 through 4, which was commercially very successful. Unfortunately, politics came into it when Ariane 5 was developed, but nonetheless, Ariane 5 has been an outstanding engineering success. It's been commercially very successful, and the reliability of it is second to nobody's. So it's been very good for the Europeans. But of course, the British pulled out of all of that. In '72, the governments of the day decided, that's it. All that we're going to do is develop the applications and let other people do the launcher part. From somebody in government, I suppose that might seem like a good idea, but what they had missed the point of is that our aerospace industry was actually very good. And what we did, we abdicated from a lead position and allowed the rest of European industry to overtake it. And what we didn't let the Europeans do, we let the Americans do. So, I mean, our one triumph was Concorde, and that even today there isn't a replacement for it. Technologically, it was good, but what again we always fail to do in this country is having, if we had regarded Concorde as a demonstrator, recognised its limitations, and then built on that to go on to a new generation of vehicle, I believe that we would have still have had supersonic, if not hypersonic, travel now for several decades. And we would still be ahead of the world in all of that. But various governments, and I have no love for Margaret Thatcher or their policies, but I won't say more than that. And she particularly wanted to see all this handed over to other people, but she did support what came later, which was Hotol. And for a while there was strong support from the Thatcher government, in particularly in the form of Sir Geoffrey Patty. So where did Hotol come from? Well, after 72, even by 1970, I realised I'd got to leave the business. I could see that Blue Street wasn't going to make it. And so in 71, I went to work for British Aircraft Corporation on classified weapons work. I was the only propulsion engineer in British Aircraft Corporation at that time. And what they allowed me to do, because I was going to be shut up behind closed doors, and I couldn't talk to my family or anybody about what I was doing, and I've always liked to discuss space and things like that, I negotiated that half a day a week I could have their computer. Friday afternoons I could do whatever I wanted on their computer, which, if you remember, sort of back to the sort of early 70s, getting access to my own IBM computer all to myself to do what I wanted with was a major breakthrough. I also managed to get from Rolls-Royce a copy of the equilibrium combustion program. So I was able to run all kinds of propellant combinations, all kinds of engine configurations. And so I had 4 years of bliss whilst I investigated just about every conceivable rocket engine case you could imagine. But there was a sad conclusion to that, in that there was no way of taking a rocket to orbit single stage. It was always going to have to be some sort of multi-stage operation. The Americans had probably got it quite right with a two-stage aeroplane, in which the first stage peeled off and flew back, and then the second stage went to orbit, did its job, and then flew back. And of course, what the Americans did ultimately was throw the first stage away and put two solid boosters on it to get the development costs down. When I can't remember the figure that went to Congress, it was going to be $10 or $12 billion, and they threw it out and said they got to halve the development cost. And so they've got the space shuttle, which certainly met the development cost, but of course never managed to achieve anything like reasonable operation costs. Every single flight of the space shuttle was $600 to $700 million recurring cost. I mean, that's a staggering number. And originally, the figures that were hoped for were sort of like 1% of that. So the space shuttle as such was never really a success. But I did get an opportunity to not only monitor what other people around me were doing, but also to do an awful lot of design studies myself. And it was clear that the goal that I was been striving for, even at Rolls-Royce, was single stage to orbit. That wouldn't be achievable with rocket. But when I went to British Aircraft Corporation, I needed something to interact with the outside universe on. And so Project Daedalus was born. Now, with Daedalus, I decided that what we should do is make a real step forward. Len Carter, who was the secretary at the BIS at the time, was very sort of excited about that. And Len Carter introduced me to Tony Martin, and Tony Martin and I hit it off. Tony is a physicist, I'm an engineer. We found that our respective skills fitted very, very well together. And so from 73 to 78, Project Daedalus rolled, and we really pushed the technology on that and reached the conclusion that interstellar flight, at least for the nearer stars, is possible. Based on what we learned on that, various other things grew out of the society, like discussion of Fermi paradox and that sort of thing. So all of that was all exciting stuff, but by 1982, Tony and myself were working on electric propulsion. We'd extended the Daedalus stuff into looking at propelling world ships. And so all of that, and we'd pulled together a really great team all around us, which still echoes on in the society today. But in 82, I realised that we were looking at things to get us to the stars, and we still couldn't get off the planet. So, there's this problem called von Perke's paradox, which is it's easier to get anywhere else in the universe than to get into orbit.
Yeah, frustrating.
Sorry?
It's very frustrating.
Well, it's very frustrating. I went back and revisited all the work I'd done at British Aircraft Corporation and, of course, the nuclear propulsion work at Rolls-Royce to see whether there was a route forward. And I realised that if you replace the nuclear reactor in this cycle, which used an intermediate thermodynamic cycle to produce work in the process of heating the hydrogen, if you replace the reactor by air at very high temperatures, so I started off looking at speeds of Mach 7, but that had to creep down eventually to about Mach 5 because of material limits and so on. But Hotol, the engines for Hotol were born out of that, and it was the thermodynamics that came from the nuclear engine that made the Hotol cycle work. But when I say the thermodynamics, it turns out that there are immense variations and subtleties on the thermodynamics, especially when you realise you've got real materials around you you've got to work with. So hydrogen is a superb material, but down at very low temperatures, which is where you want to be, its specific heat varies very considerably. So that screws up sort of the ideal cycles that you'd like to put together, and you have to start to accommodate real fluids. But anyway, the first of the engines that sort of came out of that, I'd sketched up. I got hold of John Scott, who was a guy I'd worked with at Rolls-Royce, and Bob Parkinson, who I'd worked with all through my career up to that point. We had a meeting in my office at Culham, and basically sort of went, I've been working on an engine. I think there's sort of merit in it. Scotty was the turbo machinery man, so we talked about the turbo machinery. And Bob Parkinson said, well, I've been looking at the other end of the problem. I've been having a look at the issues of getting a single-stage vehicle into orbit and back, not looking at the propulsion, but more the recovery and sort of general structure side of it. And all of a sudden, we'd got an interested group. So British Aerospace had obviously pulled in a lot of the old companies. British Aircraft Corporation had been swallowed into British Aerospace, and the Concorde team was now available. And so by sort of 1983, 84, we'd got a little group of people sort of ticking away the looking at what a single stage-to-orbit vehicle, based on an engine which could accelerate using the atmosphere up to Mach 5, but then with minor changes of configuration, go up to be a rocket engine to take the vehicle to orbit, and putting in where the materials, technology was going and so on. All of that looked very, very good. And so we started a long and tedious process of trying to get interest out of the Ministry of Defence, interest out of the... we didn't have a space agency of those days. It had become the British National Space Centre, trying to get interest out of them. And we were making very, very little progress. And then all of a sudden, Sir Geoffrey Patty sort of emerged on the scene. Probably one of the most intelligent people we've ever had in charge of, well, I can't even remember what, I think it was called Department of Technology, Department for Industry and Technology in those days, DTI. And he could see the merits of it. And so in 87, he found sort of a couple of £1 million to put in, which in 87 values was quite a substantial amount, provided that Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace would match it, which they did. So from 87 up to 89, we had a 2-year well-funded programme, investigated many of the problems with a single stage-to-orbit vehicle. And again, the straight, if you model it as a point mass, then it worked fine. But once you put the aerodynamics in and the annoying tendency of the vehicle to pitch up at high Mach numbers, so it turned out that this vehicle, which was completely trimmed at takeoff, by the time we got to Mach 5, there was a 2,000 ton-metre moment trying to pitch the vehicle up. And one of the guys, Steve Furness, had been telling us for a long time we'd never trim it. And we all ignored him, of course. And so we got to 1989, Kenneth Clark Margaret Thatcher put Kenneth Clark in charge of space. Unfortunately, most things that Kenneth Clark's been in charge of, except the Treasury, have been a disaster. And his view on anything was, what does this do for Kenneth Clark's career? And I don't mind saying this on a podcast. It's always, the first, second and third most important things to Kenneth Clark have been Kenneth Clark. And so he found it easier to chop it rather than let it go ahead. I did have some limited letter exchange with him, but clearly of limited intellects, but you probably want to edit that out. I don't mind if you don't.
We love stuff like that.
The consequence of that was that the Hotol project came to a lingering death. Hat off to British Aerospace. They tried to pull the Russians in. We'd become chummy with the Russians by the early 1990s, and they'd got the Antonov 224, which was able to lift a vehicle to high altitude. One thing about Bob Parkinson is that, no matter how much technology you take off him, he still manages to sort of bolt what he's got left together to achieve some sort of spectacular end. And so something called Interim Hotol came out of the British Aerospace work. But by then, because I was already working at the Atomic Energy Authority at that time. I need to come back to that probably and say where that happened. But I then sort of went back to the Atomic Energy Authority for a while, but I couldn't let everything rest. So John Scott and a colleague from Rolls-Royce, Richard Varvel, who had arrived on the scene, and myself, we formed Reaction Engines in 1989 with no other objective at that time than trying to save all the technology that we had that Rolls-Royce, British Aerospace and myself had all put together. And so it was a rescue manoeuvre at that point in time. Let me just backtrack briefly to at the end of the 4 years with British Aircraft Corporation, I was starting to go a little bit funny. Some people would say, how can you tell? But my wife had started to complain to my friends that I seemed to be changing and so on. And I realised that it was the intense security surrounding the work that I was doing that was getting to me. And so Tony Martin, who I'd worked with on Daedalus, obviously, was already at the Culham laboratory working on electric propulsion. He'd been there 2 years. He alerted me to a job going in the engineering design division, which I took. And so from 1976 onwards, I was actually working on nuclear fusion machines for the Atomic Energy Authority at Culham, eventually into jet, and then from 1980 onwards on a machine called RFX, a reverse field pinch experiment. But all of this gave me a lot of background in the design of electromagnetic field coils, a lot of understanding of the plasma physics of these machines and so on, which built on everything we'd put into Daedalus. So I'd already got a career sort of with the Atomic Energy Authority, but it was very hard for me to actually stop when Hotol died. But what I am going to do there is pause just for a second while I have a drink.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
So there we go.
Simply mind-blowing. Yeah. I can't wait for part 2.
That seemed like a good place to stop, where he couldn't carry on any longer. I mean, Alan Bond really is. I would go as far as saying he is the absolutely archetypal rocket engineer.
I absolutely concur.
Yeah, he's an absolute legend.
Thank you, Alan. More to come.
Brilliant
stuff.
So just to finish this programme on a bit of a downer.
Oh. Matt, it's Friday. Why are you doing this to us? You're meant to send us away with a hop in our step.
Yeah, I'm going to ask...
And spunk in our...
Jamie, are we alone in the universe?
Well, what's your definition of alone?
Well, are there other intelligent beings out there on different planets and stuff?
If I was a betting man, I would say that there isn't. I think that we will, in the next 50 years, find life, but not as we know it, Matthew.
Ooh. So
what's your take?
Well, my take is based on the scientific evidence that's out there, and luckily for me, physicist Anders Sandberg, Eric Drexler and Toby Ord, all of the Future of Humanity Institute of Oxford University, have written a paper that they've just lodged on ARC6. It's yet to be peer-reviewed, but they've combined the Fermi paradox and the Drake equation and applied lots of mathematical rigour to it. And unfortunately, the conclusion is we're probably alone in the universe. Now, just stop and think how incredibly ridiculous that statement is. It's frightening. It's just, wow. Ridiculous.
Do you think it's frightening, Matt? I think it just makes us lucky. Makes me happy that we live in a time that we happen in all these billions of years, Matt, that we happen to live in a time where we can listen to podcasts, we can listen to Alan Bond.
Oh,
and that I can go and play Street Fighter 2. That just blows my mind.
Yeah, the fact that we can control tiny electrons going around little processors, and that we can do all these rockets with these crazy thermodynamic properties. And
it's a hell of a ride, Matt.
We might be the only thing that in the universe that's done that. So yeah, this is what they said, that there is a substantial probability that we are alone. And they quoted US astronomer Jill Tarter, who described the Drake equation as a wonderful way to organise our ignorance. And just pointing out that the margins of error are so massive in multiple orders of magnitude, it doesn't really tell us anything. So they've really tried their best. They've also quoted US astronomer Stephen J. Dick, who says, perhaps never in the history of science has an equation been devised yielding values differing by 8 orders of magnitude. Each scientist seems to bring his own prejudices and assumptions to the problem. So, yeah, it's the Drake equation. Maybe doesn't tell us much apart from the scientists that are trying to work out the numbers in the Drake equation. So... So when we take account of realistic uncertainty, replacing point estimates by probability distributions that reflect current scientific understanding, we find no reason to be highly confident that the galaxy, or even the observable universe, contains other civilizations.
Well, I concur, and it's that thing, Matt, isn't it? I mean, who knows? But I think we're just very, very lucky. So I see it as a silver lining, Matt. I'm not scared.
There's also another guy called Tegmark who assumed that there's no reason two intelligent civilizations should be any particularly distance from each other. And therefore, if you've got something like the Milky Way, which is a minuscule fraction of the observable universe, which itself is only a tiny part of the actual universe, it's unlikely that two intelligent civilizations would arise in the same observable universe. Thus, to all intents and purposes, we are very probably alone. So lots of lines of thought there going towards
I'd like to discuss this more, Matt. I think we should try and interview one of the physicists.
Yeah, we should get two on. We should
Eric or Toby. Let's chat.
Yeah, let's chat. We should get on someone that believes that we aren't alone, and someone that believes that we are, and see what the intellectual argument is between the two.
Well, let's see if we can make that happen. That would be wicked.
That would be. Jamie.
Yes.
You've been listening to the Interplanetary Podcast, putting the ace back into space.
Have I?
Well,
I've really enjoyed it. I tell you what, Matt, I enjoyed it so much that I'm going to go to iTunes, leave a lovely review. Might even chuck a 5-star up there. I'm going to go and subscribe to the podcast, more importantly, so I get notified when a new one comes out, because I ain't missing this. Then I'm going to go to Twitter, hit follow, Instagram, hit follow, Facebook, hit follow. But Matt, more importantly, I enjoyed it so much that I'm going to go over to Patreon and donate a little something each month so that it helps Matt and Jamie. That's what I'm going to go and do.
And you know what? We've had some. We did get a load of new patrons this month. Thank you very much. Yeah,
thank you so much, guys.
We really did. Thank you very, very much, everyone that's out there. We will read out your names on the first podcast of the month. That's when we're going to do it, because
you're all legends, and it makes this show carry on.
We've got some new Sklon level, and yeah, I know. How cool is that? So. Really brilliant. Thank you very much for being part of the show, and your contributions are unbelievably important. They've been paying for things like my yellow fever vaccination,
yellow fever jab,
and you'll see that that's going to be very, very important next week. So next week we have our David Baker chat. That's going to be really, really interesting. We've got some great stuff on that.
The legend comes back.
And we've got some brilliant interviews coming up. We've got the rest of the Alan Bond interview. We've got an interview with Romain Chaz of the Mars.
That was great.
Of Mars 500. That's a really excellent interview. Really fascinating. I mean, what an experience to have had. He actually was in it. Yeah, see, he was in it.
in it.
In it to win it. So that's really good, and he's got some very cool stories as part of that, so that's worth listening to. So we hope you enjoyed today's episode. I definitely enjoyed the Alan Bond interview, so we'll see you.
Me too. Can't wait for next week.
We'll see you next week. Space
right, Matt.
Podcasts.
I'm off to play Street Fighter 2 Yoga Flame.
I'm off to go to work and hope that no one noticed that I was missing this morning.
God, you're boring. Bye, guys.
See you soon. Bye.